The smartest cat I ever knew at SNL, and a much revered figure there is joining us for another segment. This is my former producer, longtime writer and contributor, Jim Downey. Jim, I had Norm on the show yesterday. I always thought Norm, from the first second I saw him, was just a flat-out misanthropic genius. I always gave him a wide berth as far as time schedules and that, because I just said, well, I'm going to grab Amadeus and tell him he has to be here to do busy work. You know what I mean? That isn't going to happen. So I think he's a genius. What was it like to work with him on Update?
Well, he is a genius and the most fearless performer. He likes people to laugh at his stuff. He enjoys that, but it's sort of one of like, half a dozen important aspects of what he does. Mm-hmm. So that if he really loves a joke or a bit, he will happily go out there and do it, whatever the response is. And there was if you want to hear a story,
I love me a Norm story.
One time we were in the office doing Update stuff, and there'd been a news item about there was going to be a newspaper for the homeless, and so we were thinking about doing some of that. So we started improvising. It was more of a scene, not something we could do on the segment, but it was like a tough kind of Perry White kind of editor going like, "You, Miller, I want 500 words on going to the bathroom in your pants. You, Immel, give me something. Give me a human interest thing on urine stain matter. You, was that kind of thing. Yeah. And like a lot of like photos, maybe some, a little human side. What are pets, that kind of thing. And so nothing came of it, and I sort of forgot we had the conversation. And then the first meeting we have after the summer, Norm comes in and goes, "Hey, Downey, remember that that thing we were talking about there with the remember that thing with the newspaper for the homeless, that thing, the homeless newspaper?" And I go, yeah. He goes, yeah, well, I was out in L.A. and I was asked to do this benefit, for the coalition to feed the homeless, and I'm going, no. And he goes, yeah, I did that bit, They hated it. Hated it.
All right, you tell me now. That's the Andy Kaufman part of the joke, or is he actually surprised that they hated it? That's what I can't quite figure with Lord.
I know.
Jimmy calls in here periodically and says that he has bought a puppet and he wants to work material out on the show. And I'll say, well, tell me about the puppet. And it's an old man puppet who's a Holocaust denier. And it's obviously just Norm sitting at home talking as Norm. He makes no pretension to a puppet voice.
I know.
And I think he's Andy. I don't know. I view a lot of Andy Kaufman in there. It's just
he also would like to, one of the things that he would really enjoy just getting into a character, and then you could not get him out of it. Like he liked doing old man stuff,
yes,
like being an old geezer and complaining about aches and pains and stuff like that. And then you go, okay, Norm, now seriously, now we actually have to talk about it. He'd start doing stuff about rheumatism and things like that, and you just had to plead with him to just stop. But he was on his own kind of set of rhythms.
The speed with which he would take his sport coat off at the end of his Letterman impression always I would watch the thing just to watch, because Letterman's so ill at ease with show business, always makes this conscious show of getting rid of the sport coat at the end of the show. And when Norm picked up on that and did that as impression, God, I fell out. Hey, I have to ask you about it, the real Andy Kaufman real quickly. What were you hip to him before he comes in, or what's that?
Well, I had not. He had been on a couple of times the first season, and I had missed most of the first season, so I didn't really get to meet him until year two. But he, there was one time I was flying back from visiting my family in the Midwest, and I arrive at Newark airport, at like midnight because the flight was delayed, and I don't know why, but in those days I guess I was too cheap or something, but I decided to take the bus into the Port Authority, and I get on the bus, and there's a solitary figure in the back in a brown hoodie, and it was Andy Kaufman. So we went back to that was where we sort of bonded on that bus trip from Newark Airport. So he used to come by the office and ask if anyone wanted to go see kung fu movies in Times Square. That was when Times Square had virtually nothing but kung fu movies.
Right.
And so I went a couple times with Mr. Kaufman, and he was like just a fascinating person to be around. He quite, he loved those movies and could discuss them like a completely normal person. But when he wanted it to get into his thing, he was as unshakable as Norm,
Yeah. Folks, I know that SNL over the last 35 years has become the cultural place where young people hang their hat. And if it does you any good in a world where people seem to get misappropriated power or misappropriated wealth, to know that the finest man I ever met there was right at the center of it for over 3 decades should do all our hearts well. Jimbo, I love you.
Love you right back.
All right. We'll talk at you down the road. That is the great Jim Downey.